All right, well, it's 3 o'clock and let's get started. And so I want to introduce Bob Schultz with Verux. And Bob, why don't you start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself, your company, and then the hour is all yours.
Right on. So we'll get going right away. I've been a part of this, and John is a good friend, and he's been roping me into being involved in Stormwater Awareness Week. He and Rebecca for a while now. I keep on putting myself out here to do these things. So we got some interesting stuff to talk about today associated with Caltrans. So quickly, the plug about Verux. So we are a stormwater compliance firm. We also do construction management. We have been around since 2010. Currently have offices in Sacramento, where we started, Santa Rosa, Fresno, Clovis area, and in Chico. I am a civil engineer and a construction manager. I have done that since the beginning of my career, a long time ago. When I had hair, actually. So going back for quite some time, worked in the heavy civil, worked for Tiger Construction, started Verux as a construction management and environmental consulting firm. And that is 95% of what we do at this point is stormwater consulting. I have all the certificates you need, right? Trainer of record. I'm a QSD. I have my Title 22. I'm going to talk about that a little later when it comes to Caltrans. I am also a water pollution control manager trainer of record for Caltrans, the 8-hour water pollution control manager training. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the plug for Verux as well. Ben Rao, this good looking dude. Ben Rao is my business partner since 2010 and has much the same background as I do. And if you see him out and about representing Verux on projects, he also is still involved on the construction management side on some of the larger mixed use master plan community development projects in Sacramento. So when it comes to the 8-hour water pollution control manager training, there's a total, as of today, there are 1,560 people in the state of California who have been trained. I've trained 687 of them. So, and then last or second to last plug for that is that this is my training schedule. You can go to veruxinc.com. I actually have one coming up in October, but it's full. So the next ones that are on the agenda are in December, February, and April. And then I do for larger groups will come to you potentially if you have a larger group that needs to be trained as an 8-hour water pollution control manager trainer. And then lastly, there's a database for all people who have been trained. The reason why I knew those numbers is that there's a database for all people who have been trained as a water pollution control manager, 8-hour training for Caltrans. That is housed at the Verux Inc. website. So if you go to veruxinc.com, you go to the certified search, you can go in and confirm, and Caltrans does that when someone's listed as a water pollution control manager. They go to the database, they can put the person's name in and confirm that they have been trained. So now we have the ability for someone to check by name, company, or city to confirm that they've been trained as an 8-hour water pollution control manager. Okay, so today, just kind of want to throw this out. This is about Caltrans. This is about the changes that are pending that are coming out in October, and also to talk about the timeline of what's happened since the 2022 CGP came into place. So from added value standpoint for today's workshop, please drop questions in the chat as things come up. I've got a couple of helpers here today, and I'm going to introduce one of them in the next slide that are going to help and look at those chat questions. We are going to have time at the end to answer those questions, but please do that. And when we get to the question and answer at the end, if you want to unmute yourself and ask rather than put it in the chat, that's all good too. You can discuss your experiences, and feel free to contact me in the future. My contact information will be included at the end as well. So a lot of this knowledge that I'm bringing to the table comes from my involvement in stormwater, obviously, but in being involved on Caltrans projects as a water pollution control manager. And then primarily, a lot of it comes from being involved in the Caltrans Industry Stormwater Subcommittee, CISWIS, okay? There is this subcommittee on stormwater that incorporates and tries to get collaboration between industry and Caltrans on stormwater issues and new spec changes, things that are necessary, things that come up, lessons learned. That's the intent of this committee, is to work together collaboratively, come together, build a consensus, and then work through potential spec changes and other things, and just helping to give guidance in both directions, and so everybody understands each other. The CISWIS co-chairs are two very hardworking people that really spend a lot of time on this committee and working on this committee on top of their normal jobs, right? Their other jobs. Christine Williams is amazing. She works for Granite Construction on their environmental side. She co-chairs for industry, and the co-chair for Caltrans is Sean Ng. They've been working together as co-chairs. Hopefully they continue to do this for a long time, for quite a while now. Our next meeting is October 17th in West Sacramento. So if you are interested in becoming a part of the Caltrans Industry Subcommittee, please feel free to reach out. We can put you in contact with the co-chairs and move from there. We're always looking for help and perspectives and people come to the table. Now, special acknowledgement for my huge help in this presentation today is Allison Pomerink, who is a Caltrans Senior Transportation Engineer at headquarters. Allison was the author, worked and created these specifications and the changes to these specifications. She's a huge part of a lot of these slides and the information that I took from her previous presentations that she gave internally at Caltrans. Allison is on the call. Allison is going to do her best to look at questions that hit the chat and provide answers. And there she is. She just brought up her video. So Allison's awesome. And she is around and a part of this presentation. And she'll, if I say something wrong, she can feel free to unmute yourself, Allison, and set me straight. But then when we get to the end, Allison's going to help answer questions as well. Okay, so seminar agenda today. So we have the 2022 CGP timeline and Caltrans implementation progress. So we're going to talk, a lot of this people may already understand, but we're going to talk about how we got to where we are right now. We're going to talk about this October 2024 specification update and a discussion of those changes, the primary changes. There's some I dotting and T crossing that's not as critical. We're going to gloss over, but we're going to hit the hot items that were really important in my opinion. We're going to talk about future specification changes. In particular, I'm going to spend some time talking about bid items because this is something that's near and dear to me and we're really trying to advocate for from the industry side and working with Caltrans on it. In the October 17th meeting, hopefully we're going to be talking in detail about bid item changes, and then we'll have questions. So there's our agenda. So jumping into it quickly, so the 2022 CGP implementation started on September 1st, 2023. It's a two-year CGP regulatory transition period. Projects with WDID numbers that were issued prior to September 1st, 2023 could continue to work under the 2009 permit, and we're in that phase right now. We're in the grandfathering period here, unless an update is required sooner, such as additional DSA. If you have additional DSA, you're supposed to be updating your project to the 2022 CGP for projects that were permitted prior to September 1st, 2023. So in 2023, there were standard spec changes that were updated in order to try and capture the 2022 CGP issues. Caltrans it's not an easy thing. It's a huge agency. They have a lot of specs, and they had from September 2022 to September 2023 to try and implement all the changes necessary to capture all of the changes in the 2022 CGP. So they did their best. CISWIS and industry did as much as they could to try and help with that process, and basically some really hardworking, diligent individuals got that permit or the spec change out in July 24th of last year, 2023, to incorporate that, and it's a good document, but there were some things that needed to be adjusted. So the CISWIS provided feedback on the specification immediately upon its being presented, and that is a lot of what has been incorporated into this 2024 spec change. Changes were focused on lessons learned after the permit went live in September of 2023. And really, CISWIS on the industry side, we're not throwing shade at Caltrans. That timing to get that spec change out in 2023 was very short. And you'll see in a minute how the timeline we have this new spec change coming out in October, and the next spec change will be in October of 2025. And you'll see how that process goes. It is cumbersome, I guess, is the fair statement. So the 2024 standard revision changes standards revisions are come out. There was a preview posting in July of this year, and October 21st is when the implementation happens. Okay. Section 13 specification updates were based on construction industry feedback, as I mentioned in the last slide. And we have updates that have been made to Section 13, SSPs, standard plans, and Section 13 bid items, but they're minor on the bid item side. It's really just a type or I dotting T crossings as much as a major change there. So this is the memorandum that went out in April of 2023 that stated that as of July of 2023, there was a new spec, and that's what came out in July of last year. There was also a memorandum that came out in July of this year to state that Caltrans is now changing how they integrate their construction standards publications, and that essentially stating these new items, which is that from this point on, standards, including standard specs, special provisions, standard plans, and bid items, are now posted annually in October of each year. Previously, there were semi-annual, now it's annually. So in October of each year is when spec changes are going to come out. Mid-cycle updates could be posted in April, including SSPs, plans, and bid items, but they can't change the standard specs. And then anything beyond that is what, and Allison could unmute and tell me if I'm wrong, but that's considered a non-standard special provision, NSSP, which these are project-specific specifications that have to have owner review and approval. So if there's something major on a certain project or some major item that comes up, there is the opportunity to do an NSSP, but it's not, they don't take those lightly. It's not something that's easy to get done, but that is to deal with some other issue that has to be done less frequently than semi-annual aid. Okay, so the 2023 standards are currently in effect as of right now, but as of October 21st of this year, there's new standard specs or standards that are coming out. They're currently available for preview right now. The 2024 SSPs can be used immediately as NSSPs with owner approval if there was something needed to come out sooner. Mid-cycle, this is kind of gives you an idea of how the process works. So mid-cycle revisions are due in January if you wanted something to come out in April. For something that's going to come out in 2025 October, the due dates are not posted yet, but they're likely around April. So the standard is if we found something in these specs that come out this October, and we felt like, oh, this needs to change for next year. Really, that process needs to start immediately. You're going through, you're working with someone like with Allison, the SysWis is working with Allison on those changes. We're going through, drafting them, they're double checking it. Around January or so is when things are starting to really get pushed together. And by April, really the horse is in the barn. And from April to October is approvals and other things happening behind the scenes, but there aren't a lot of changes to those standard specs between April and October when they actually come out and become official. I think that's a fair statement, but again, Allison can let us know if that's off base.
Yeah, do you mind if I chime in on that?
Yes, please do. Please do.
I just wanted to start off when you say the implementation is October 21st, that's projects going to our design group. So construction and industry is still going to see a lot of those projects on the 23 standards for a while until those projects hit RTL and bids. So just FYI. And then as far as our due dates, there's a whole slew of required reviews that we have to go through. And once we submit them to our spec standards office in April, we literally cannot touch them until they do their thing and post them. So our due dates are very hard. They won't let us touch them after that fact. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah. Any comments? Happy to work with you guys.
Yeah. And so I think it's a fairly safe thing to say, Allison, that if there's something is going to change for next October, we need to be working on it right away because of those.
Get it in now. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Jumping on to the next thing. So that gives you an idea of the timeline and the process that it takes to make these changes that we're going to be talking about. So on the Section 13 specs, one of the biggest ones, and I'm going to talk about it in a little more detail with the 2030 on the next slide, but there was one of the bigger issues that we kind of found is that when the 2023 specs came out, there was a discussion of a qualifying precipitation event, which mimicked what's in the permit. And then there was also still a storm event item. And the storm event item, so we had the half-inch, 50% chance of greater probability of over a half-inch in 24 hours. There was actually an issue because it actually said that the rain event didn't end until 2 consecutive 24-hour periods. So there was some issues there that also didn't completely match the permit or the intent of the permit that we've understood from the State Water Board. And then there was also still a storm event involved. And that storm event still talked about the 10th of an inch in 24-hour period. right? So we had two things that we were governed by, which could mean that we were having to do a pre-storm for a 1/10 of an inch rainstorm, and then we were doing a pre-QPE a few days later when it bumped over 50% chance at 1/2 inch. And so to fix that, what they've cleaned up is we've gotten rid of the qualifying precipitation event, and we have amended the storm event definition to essentially match what's in the CGP, because a storm event was referenced in many places in the section 13. So now a storm event matches what the 2022 CGP says, which is any weather permit pattern that is forecast to have 50% chance or greater probability of precipitation with a quantitative precipitation forecast of a 1/2 inch or more within 24-hour period. The event begins with 24-hour period with a 1/2 inch has been forecast and continues on subsequent 24-hour periods with 0.25 inches of precipitation or more in the forecast. So that matches the CGP. So that, to look at that and understand how that affects us, the 2030 is not changing, because this still now talks about storm events, and now it all matches the 2022 CGP. So just for everyone, to make sure everyone's clear, the 2030, the kind of the Bible of stormwater site inspections for Caltrans, this is used for risk level 1, 2, 3 water pollution control programs. So as new projects are let and are bid, now they will all follow that storm event definition, which matches the 2022 CGP, which means that water pollution control programs will also match that definition. So you will be going out on water pollution control programs only when a storm event, or doing a pre-storm for a water pollution control program only when a storm event matches the definition of a storm event for the 2022 CGP. So that is a change, but that clears this up, okay? So this hasn't changed the language on this. So qualified SWEP developer can do these things, QSP or D can do these things at least once a month, on and on. And then a QSDP or a trained delegate or assistant water pollution control manager can do these things. And we're going to talk about that. The one thing that I wanted to point out that I think we need to adjust is that that before a forecasted rain event, I apologize, I haven't been using my laser pointer. Before a forecasted rain event with less than 50%, 0.5 inches of precipitation in 24 hours. So this language would only be applicable to pre-storm event water pollution control programs or inactive status projects. So where you could have a delegate or someone else do it as well. Okay. So there's also another one of the changes. We removed the language for the Lake Tahoe hydrologic unit. So it was kind of mixed in throughout the section 13. All the Lake Tahoe hydrologic unit stuff has been pretty well pulled out, and it'll be part of an SSP for a project that's in the Lake Tahoe hydrologic unit, and that'll be 13-15. So right now I believe it says reserved, and it would only be a part of the project if you're dealing with Lake Tahoe hydrologic unit. So that is cleaned up. Allison, is that a fair statement? Then that's what the intent is for Lake Tahoe hydrologic unit, is we're pulling that out for those specific jobs. Revised roles and Allison, sorry, you were muted.
Sorry, no, yes, you're right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, good. Revised roles and responsibilities. The other thing that the 2023 spec change mentioned is the water pollution control program roles and the QSP delegate versus water pollution control manager. So there was an unintended consequence with the way the language was, where it started using QSP delegate because that came out in the 2022 CGP. And it made it, if you read it for the way it was written, you could potentially not have to have the 8-hour water pollution control manager training to be an assistant water pollution control manager. So this language has been cleaned up, that before assigning an assistant water pollution control manager, they got rid of QSP delegate there. The water pollution control manager must ensure that the assistant water pollution control manager has competent understanding of the following water pollution control work, which is the old language. And then assistant water pollution control manager must record and report issues to QSP within 24 hours. The assistant water pollution control manager must follow the QSP delegate requirements detailed in the permit. So you have to be both. When this came out in 2023, it made it so you could be either or. So then you could have defined it to say you don't have to have the 8-hour water pollution control manager training, which was not the intent. So now it's back with this change in October of this year to be a QSP delegate, you have to be an assistant water pollution control manager. To be able to be delegated responsibilities from the water pollution control manager, you have to have the 8-hour training. And you have to also meet the other requirements. So just to clarify that, so in 13-101D, it says assign a water pollution control manager, assign an alternate water pollution control manager, perform responsibilities in the manager's absence. Alternate water pollution control manager must have the same qualifications. An assistant water pollution control manager may be assigned to act under the supervision of the water pollution control manager. So that's that. And this is from the CGP, where it says foundational training, where they outlined, and the CGP training team has outlined foundational training and site-specific training. Foundational training for all delegates, according to the is required of a QSP delegate or a water pollution control manager. And one of the things I wanted to clarify was by taking the Caltrans 8-hour water pollution control manager training, you meet the requirement for foundational training. Okay, so if you've taken it and you have to take it to be an assistant water pollution control manager, you meet the requirements for foundational training, you're still required to have site-specific training to meet the requirements of the 2022 CGP. So you got to do site-specific training with your water pollution control manager, but by having the 8-hour water pollution control manager training under your belt, you've handled foundational training. Just so everyone's clear, this is just kind of a matrix of what it takes to be what it takes on a Caltrans project. Obviously, we have the QSD course, QSD, which is CASCWA or the state of California, not Caltrans. 3-day class, pass QSD exam. You have to maintain an underlying credential. A QSP has to take a 2-day class, pass the QSP exam, maintain an underlying credential. A water pollution control manager, which is a Caltrans designation. You have to be a QSD or P, either one of these. You have to take the 8-hour training, and you also have to have Title 22 hazardous waste training. This comes up in Section 14 of the Caltrans specifications, where they talk about having to have Title 22 knowledge as a water pollution control manager. If you have questions about that, you can ask at the end or send me an email directly. And then assistant water pollution control manager has to take the 8-hour water pollution control manager training only, and that allows you to work under the water pollution control manager. It also would require, though, on top of that, in order to meet the requirements, you also have to meet the requirements of QSP delegate now, based on that language I just showed you, which means you would also have to have site-specific training that's documented. Okay, other changes of Section 13 allow for electronic submittals and storage of plans, which is great. That in order to get to where we were, CGP requires printed SWEP maps on site. Water pollution control promos mimics the SWEP. So you have to retain a current copy of the authorized SWEP or water pollution control program at the job site. Maps must be printed full size. The remainder of the water pollution control program or SWEP may be in electronic format. That's straight out of the CGP. That's essentially stating that you can go electronic except for the site maps. You also now, there's adjusted language here that you can submit your SWEP within 15 days of contract approval, which the intent of that is it can be submitted electronically. They also section 13.2, which, we're reformatted the water pollution control program section to contact list to match the SWEP list. So more of semantics than anything else. Now the water pollution control program content list matches the SWEP. We now say the notification requirements to 32 hours prior to a dewatering discharge, which mimics the SWEP. Section 13.3, they clarified non-visible pollutant sampling requirements. So I'm going to get into on the next slide. Triggered to triggering events, not a storm event. Provide exceedance report submittal timelines. Immediate notification with a report within 48 hours. Change from 6. The permit requires 10 days. So just to clarify that, the permit actually requires that you submit your exceedance report if the regional board requests it in writing, but Caltrans is saying they want it within 48 hours. So, and that's clarified in their specifications, and they are free to do that. Change the annual report fixed price to $3,000, clarified surface water buffer requirements. So in the next couple slides, we'll kind of talk about that. So the surface water buffer, 50-foot undisturbed natural buffer from edge of disturbed soil to receiving top of bank, total maximum daily load. I believe these were in the 2023, but it now includes sediment load calculations for surface water buffer when required by the permit, calculate sediment load of surface water buffer and equivalent sediment load reductions achieved within the 50-foot undisturbed buffer, and they can be maintained using Russell 2 or other required methods. So I wanted to clarify that, and that is now in section 13.3. As far as water quality sampling goes, it's during observed non-visible pollutant triggering condition now instead of a storm event. So each non-visible pollutant source, corresponding uncontaminated control sample, each non-visible pollutant source, and corresponding controlled sample during a storm event. Turbidity, pH, other constituents. Collect samples for each 24-hour period of a storm event. Non-visible pollutant sampling can end before the end of the storm event if corrective actions are completed prior to further discharge of the pollutant. So these are all endeavoring to get caught up with the CGP and make sure that's clear. In section 13.4 was updated for illegal connection and illicit discharge detection reporting to match the Caltrans NPDES permit. So minor, but included in there. There were some ATS requirements that were updated for lab results, added notifications requirements 48 hours prior to starting an ATS operation to Caltrans. Again, I-dotting, T-crossing, concrete washout fill restrictions changed from 6 inches below to the rim to 75% of capacity to match the BMP handbooks. Incorporated new water quality rain event definition to replace previous storm event section 1311. So 1311 on the water quality monitoring includes specifications for monitoring water quality and applies if a bid item for a water quality monitoring report or annual report water quality report is shown in the bid list. A water quality rain event, a storm that produces or is forecast to produce at least 1/10 of an inch of precipitation within 24 hours. And this is not intended to be associated with the CGP. This is for other in-water work like 401, 402 permits, 1602s, etc. That's the intent of the water quality rain event. And so visual inspection reports for each water quality rain event and non-stormwater discharge. Those are all visual, okay? Work must include. So that's where we're at with the water quality monitoring that was been updated. Again, meant to not mimic the CGP, but in water work permits. The SSP 1315, I mentioned this previously, that introduces appropriate changes for the Lake Tahoe CGP projects. Replaces storm event definition, adds REAPs, because REAPs are still included in Lake Tahoe permits. Replace type K railing in section 1310. So again, the Lake Tahoe SSP is specifically for projects subject to Lake Tahoe CGP. So it's to be used in place of 13-3. There's a new bid item for a Lake Tahoe stormwater pollution prevention plan, includes unique TRPA requirements, editable based on project needs, receiving water sampling, construction windows, and TRPA permit. So if you're not aware, working in the Lake Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and where the Lake Tahoe permit is a significant difference from the 2009 or the 2022 CGP. So if you're going to go up there, learn it, live it. If you're going to go up there, understand it. Caltrans understands that. That's the reason why they've tried to make this cleaner, and instead of interspersing Lake Tahoe items within section 13 now, the primary is going to be, there'll be a special SSP that comes out on a Lake Tahoe project to try and explain all of the Lake Tahoe permit requirements and the issues associated with them. Okay, very important. I think it's a great job by Caltrans to try and make this cleaner and more understandable, and understand what it takes to get it done up there and keep Tahoe blue. Existing bid items, so the only changes to the bid items that have come out at this point, and we're going to switch gears in a second and talk about other bid items, but the bid item changes so far really is that they really only changed. It says stormwater sampling analysis day, stormwater annual report. There is no more REAP anymore on any job that's a 2022 CGP project. So it just changed it to, on the stormwater sampling analysis day, stormwater annual report, it just combined the two words to stormwater, and there is now a Lake Tahoe stormwater pollution prevention plan. So those are the changes in this specification issuance in October to the bid items. Okay, so that was a lot on the spec changes. Now we're going to get into potential future bid items. It's an opportunity here, if there's a specific question about what I just ran through, we can get into that, or we can save it to the end. Allison may have been answering questions as we've been going along. So, okay, future bid item changes. So I wanted to try and do something here. I'm going to test and see whether or not I can pull this off. So please hold, hang on for a second. 2 in the chat. USB. Almost done. Okay, I've added in the chat, I've added 4 things which are listed here. And so here's the situation. So I've added some items to the chat. And as I'm talking through there, I'm giving you my rationale for why I think these should be bid items. Please feel free to go in and add a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's kind of a poll that I'm running here today, because I plan on taking this back and continued. We're already having this discussion in the SysWIS. We're already having this discussion about bid items. It was something we were hoping to get included in this spec change that's coming out in October. It was too much and too soon to try and get it through. But I believe that there is a real necessity for having new bid items associated with the 2022 CGP. So I added to the chat what I consider to be some of the core bid items that I think should be added, and I'm going to talk through why that is. So in the past and current bids for risk level 2 and 3 projects, we had REAPs and we had stormwater sampling and analysis days, right? So REAPs, unless it's a 2009 job, are gone. Now we just have stormwater sampling and analysis days. Obviously, you have SWEP and you have annual report, but on risk level 2 and 3 projects only, we had REAP and we had stormwater sampling and analysis day. Well, REAP's gone, right? So in my opinion, okay, I believe that that items should be included for all risk levels, and I'm going to talk about why that is. So needed badly, in my opinion. Let's vote in the chat, thumbs up or down, okay? So I threw these in. So these are the inspections from the 2030 down below that talk about the different inspections on project sites. So I believe that based on the fact that the 2022 CGP requires a full QSP, you can't delegate all responsibilities anymore, and a full QSD to do field inspections. In the past, you could have a delegate do any inspection previously. Now, which I think is a good thing, that the 2022 CGP requires that a full QSP do certain inspections and a full QSD do certain inspections. That changes costs. It does, frankly. It's just the reality of where we are. It changes costs and difficulty and makes things a little bit more, but also can really help water quality if you have an experienced professional doing these inspections. That being said, so a QSP, I believe there should be an item for a QSP inspection. So that includes monthly COIs, NALs, and NOTs. So a QSP has to be doing those inspections. So I think ought to be an item for that. The reason for having a bid item, and I think Caltrans does an amazing job of this compared to most other municipalities or certainly private work. There's plenty of jobs out there, private work, that just say SWEP, one lump sum. It's all in there. So now we're in conflict, because it's in the discharger or LRP's best interest to spend more money and as much money as possible to make sure they're in compliance. And it's in the contractor's best interest, well, not best interest, but it's in the contractor's interest to do enough to be in compliance, but not more. To spend less money, not more, because that can come out of the profits if it's a lump sum item, right? Caltrans does a great job of creating bid items, so we don't have these conflicts, generally speaking. Well, now we're removing bid items. So not having a REAP, as an example, I believe that a QSP pre-QPE is more expensive than doing a REAP. We could do REAPs with a non-QSP in the 2009 permit, but we had a bid item for it, and that helped to capture those costs. And it's also something that no one has control over. Only Mother Nature has control over some of these items. So I believe that at bid time, it's a hard bid world. You're out there bidding a project, you're going to be wrong. And Caltrans has a template for how they determined how many REAPs there were, how many stormwater sampling and analysis days, but they're always wrong, or I would say most of the time they're going to be wrong, because Mother Nature is the determining factor about how many stormwater sampling and analysis days are out there. So I believe on those items in particular where we can't do it, where Mother Nature is the one making the decision, I think we should have bid items for those, so that you have an item, you have an approximation of the number based on the schedule and based on the climate and the area where you are. Caltrans can develop that. And then it goes up or down based on what actually happens. So a QSP inspection, monthly, COI, NAL, NOT. Yes, some of those things you should know, and they should be something that you could do based on schedule. You should only have one NOT. You only have so many months that you're doing inspections. But a COI, NAL, those things are not something, and there are going to be many more NALs than there used to be. because we're now doing one sample there's no averaging anymore. A QSP pre-QP is the biggest no-brainer, in my opinion, of all of these inspections and the bid items I think they should be. We had a REAP, it should be replaced with a QSP pre-QP. And I think that should be more for all risk levels, personally. Why on a risk level 1 project would you not have this? Because it's, again, something that Mother Nature controls. So why not have that? You still have to have the pre-QPE for a risk level 1 project. So why not have it? And again, it's something that the cost should be captured. During and post-storm event inspections, replace sampling day. So you're having to do, again, there's no way to know exactly how many during and post-storm inspections you're going to have to do on a project because Mother Nature governs that. And so instead of having a sampling and analysis day, have a during and post-storm inspection. Because again, sampling and analysis day really should be based on how many days you mobilize to sample, whether or not you sample. Why not take that out and replace sampling and analysis day with during and post-event inspections? Something that can't be bid properly because you don't know what Mother Nature is going to do during post-storm inspections. And it's possible that you have to sample during a post-storm because if there's still water discharging from the site, you're required to sample. So why not have both of those things in one item that covers that? QSD inspections, I think that this is something that, again, totally new. It requires a new bid item, but also an expensive item. You have to have someone as a full QSD at project start, twice annually, during NALs, during COIs, and a regional board required inspection by a QSD. So again, very hard to quantify those at bid time, and this levels the playing field in a hard bid world. So that is me up on my soapbox about this. I hope that we'll see how we did on thumbs ups and thumbs downs afterward. But I wanted to just bring that up and put that out there for people. Others, if people, I'd love it if people would drop things in the chat that I may have missed when it comes to potential new bid items. Again, this is on the agenda for our CISWIS meeting in October. I mean, it's already been a part of the agenda and we're working our way through this. It's good for Allison and other people from Caltrans that are on this call to get this feedback as well. And I'm up there pushing this, and I know the industry is helping to push this as well because we feel like this is going to level the playing field. It's not about taking advantage. It's about trying to make it fair and to get paid and to be, for all of us to be collaborating and be pulling the rope in the same direction when it comes to stormwater compliance. And anything we can do that's going to get us all on the same team, including having bid items so people are paid fairly for the work that they're doing, is going to be beneficial. So that is my big future changes and bid items discussion. We're getting down to it now. Just to clarify, other minor changes and future changes, the minor CEM change before a forecasted storm event with less than 50% chance of precipitation in 24 hours or 0.5 inches of precipitation in 24 hours. I think this should be a pre-storm event for a water pollution control program or inactive status. I think this should be adjusted, and that this is off the 2030. This should be adjusted to be for a pre-storm event for a water pollution control program or an inactive status project where a delegate is allowed to do that pre-storm event inspection on water pollution control programs. So you don't have to have on a water pollution control program a QSP do a pre-QPE, but that you can have a delegate do it. Other potentials or things that I know are on Allison's list are spill classifications, 13-4, bridge deck drains and scuppers, passive treatment. At this point, passive treatment is not permitted on Caltrans projects and is not a part of their specifications. It would only be through an NSSP that it can be done. What came out of my understanding from Caltrans, and Allison can confirm, is that that passive treatment is not at this point approved on Caltrans project without an NSSP. Okay. I would like to, so we've moved through this pretty fast, but hopefully we'll have some questions to answer here in a minute. But please keep us informed of spec implementation issues on your projects. Please do reach out to me, get involved in the Caltrans industry subcommittee, and bring things that come up on your projects so that we can help with specification adjustments and those kind of things and other issues. So, okay, we're at the question and answer stage. So I don't know if John or Allison or anybody wants to get into any of that and help to curate that.
All right, yeah, Allison, why don't you turn on your camera and we'll put you on the screen with Bob. All right,
On
cool.
spot. Okay.
All right, thank you, Bob. Very good presentation. Yes, we do have questions. So Allison, why don't you just feed those to Bob or answer them? See one from Amy right now.
Okay, I'm trying to. Okay, Amy, let's see. Paying for new bid items does not guarantee that the product received is of quality or accurate. Paying for REAPs in the past did not guarantee quality work.
I don't
Yep.
think that anything guarantees quality of work. That's the
True.
reason why you have specifications. It's the reason why you have rules and regulations. It's the reason why we have the CGP in the first place. So there's nothing, no, I mean, there's no insurance policy. I mean, I guess the threat of $1 million fine, if that isn't enough, then then we're in the wrong business. I mean, it does not guarantee it, no. The idea and the intent is not to, this isn't about industry or contractors trying to make a buck. It's about trying to be fair and to incentivize people to do the work. I believe, you know, that's kind of what my point was about the idea of having a lump sum. I mean, we could just say, do all SWEP lump sum. I've seen that personally work in the opposite of water quality, you know, where you have, if the contractor got the job by saying it's $100,000 to deal with the one lump sum SWEP item that includes all BMPs, all maintenance, all the other stuff, they are inherently incented to spend less of that money because that's all they're going to get because it's a lump sum item. So I believe, and I actually did a presentation at CASQA on bid items and these kind of things because I believe Caltrans does a really great job of it, and I see much less conflict in the field by having the temporary BMP bid items. By doing that, does it guarantee, if it says you have 5,000 feet of fiber roll as a bid item, does it guarantee that it's going to be installed properly or it's going to work? No, but it does. We can get an agreement that we're going to put this fiber roll out and the contractor is going to get paid for it. If they only put 3,000, they only get paid for 3. So rather than the lump sum approach, which is dangerous, and that's essentially what's happening with. And again, I'm not blaming anybody that with the spec changes and everything else, and changing bid items is difficult to do, and it takes time and effort, and making sure everybody has consensus about it at Caltrans. If you take them away, you know, we had them there for a reason. Now we're taking away. REAP is the classic example of this. REAP's gone because there is no REAP anymore. Now we do something called a QSP pre-QPE. It'd be hard for you to argue with me and tell me that that's not just as expensive or more expensive because it was required to be done by a QSP, and you're doing the same amount of work to do a pre-QP. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, I'm scrolling back up to the top. Megan asked, do water pollution control projects need QSD inspections? I provided a response that no, the water pollution control manager for water pollution control projects are QSPs. QSDs are only involved when it's a SWIP project. Another question about Russell 2. I provided a response. There was a Russell 2 presentation yesterday, so I recommend checking that out. And I think more guidance is coming out from CASQA at the conference next month. So we'll see more on that. Caltrans is working on a new Russell 2. It's in beta right now, but it may not be out and ready for a bit. Someone was asking about the Caltrans templates, the access templates, and how we're updating those to match the spec. That's a good question and something we're working on internally because those access templates are a little bit glitchy. So actually, I think we're talking about that at the industry meeting as well in October. Mel asked a question, this might be a good one for you, Bob, asking about the 8-hour foundational delegate training. Mel, was your question if the Caltrans training meets the foundational delegate training? I think that may have been the intent of that. Anyway, do you have any insight on that, Bob, if the Caltrans training 8-hour counts as?
I consider the Caltrans, the 8-hour water pollution control manager training to meet the foundational training. The CGP training team provided the foundational training guidelines, and I believe that it meets those requirements. And it's my certificates actually state that now at the bottom as I present them to people, that it meets the foundational training requirements. It still have to do on the foundational training is less than 8 hours, the requirement that came from the CGP training team. So, and the 8-hour training goes into, I believe, all of the items that are required. So.
And Bob, I posted in the chat a link to the guidelines. So it'd be easy to just open those guidelines. They're very specific about what needs to be addressed and even how much time needs to be addressed each one. So you could take the Caltrans training and hold it side by side.
Yep.
Easily see whether it meets it or not.
Yep.
Okay, I think most of the rest of it is about the bid items. If anyone wants to unmute and ask any questions, I think we would accept that as well. Did I miss anything? There's a question about how recent does RCRA training need to be for Title 22? I don't know the question.
There's no Title 22 is the Title 22 training is, there's no sunset on that. So the kind of the if someone happens to have the HAZWOPER training, the 48-hour, you're more than qualified, so you don't have to do this as well. But there's an online training. Feel free to, well, I have it here in the presentation. So there is an online training that for Title 22, just it's escaping me. I can, if someone wants to email me, I can send it to you, but it's incorporated in my water pollution control manager training course. But there's an online training. It's a 4-hour online training course. There is no sunset on the certificate. It's a one-time deal, and it meets the Title 22 standards. So I think it's like $125, and it's one of those trainings where you can do incrementally. You don't have to do all 4 hours in one shot, but that meets the Title 22 standards, training standards of a water pollution control manager.
Okay, and I'm seeing a lot of recommendations on the bid items, so that's appreciated. We'll save this chat and take that into note with our industry meeting.
Great.
Did I miss any other questions?
I see more thumbs up than thumbs downs. I think that's enough. I think that should be enough for us to incorporate all of my bid items in there.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Okay.
Is that industry meeting available to be observed? Can you be an observer on that meeting?
It's a thing where we really are looking for people to be. Yeah, I mean, it's both virtual and in person. Some of the classes, some of them in person. We're really hopeful to have people who are coming to it to be a part of it and participant, help with the process, obviously. But yeah, so feel free to email me and go from there. Any other questions for anyone else? I appreciate very much.
It looks like Megan's got a question for you, Bob. Can you go over the new surface water buffer requirements? Which I think is basically the same as the new CGP requirements.
Exactly.
But maybe you had a slide on that.
Yeah.
So basically 50 feet, you got to maintain 50 feet of vegetation. Yep. And then if you can't do that, then you need to show an equivalent protection and quantify that with Russell 2. And that was my question. I'm not sure whether your slide, it does say it there, or other approved method.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and other approved method might be just the Russell equation, possibly.
Yeah, I would assume that would be the other approved method that I could think of. The issue with Russell 2, that there's back and forth about more guidance coming out. It's one of the things that, I mean, this is kind of an editorial comment, that what I've heard from the water board is they're expecting Caltrans to update Russell 2, and I've heard from Caltrans that they aren't really actively working on a Russell 2 update. So I don't know, Allison, if you know the answer to that question, but I think it's kind of it's a little bit hanging out there right now, an update for Russell 2, right? I've heard from the state board that they're waiting on Caltrans, and at CISWIS, I have not heard that there's much going on at Caltrans on Russell 2 update. Is that fair to say?
Do you recommend using the Caltrans Russell 2 or the USDA Russell 2 for that calculation?
We use the Caltrans.
Okay. The USDA one's just been updated recently, and so I had to do that for a project, and luckily we had some 401 permits that made it an exemption, so I didn't have to do the Russell 2, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But that's one of the other approved methods. If your 401 permits go over certain things, you don't have to do the Russell 2.
And John may be able to step into the Russell 2 discussion more.
I wish I could.
Yeah.
I share the same frustration with everyone. My go-to would probably be just run it manually, use Russell. Right now, in my opinion, is Russell 2 is just too crude of a tool. It doesn't provide you anything more than what you already intuitively knew.
Yeah.
We do have a question for Robin, though. I don't know if you noticed it at 347 in the chat. It says, is a post-storm required if you receive half an inch of rain, but it wasn't a forecasted QPE? And vice versa, if it didn't rain half an inch, but it was a forecasted QPE? Good question.
I don't. Allison, do you have an answer to that, or do you want my opinion?
Go for it, Bob. I'm actually looking for the question here.
So is a post-storm required if you received half inch of rain, but it wasn't forecasted as a QPE, and vice versa? If it didn't rain half an inch, but it was forecasted as a QPE, I think that's one of the biggest issues with the new permit is what requires a post-storm, right? And how you determine that. I believe if it was not forecast as a QPE, it's really hard. How do you pin down when the half inch happened? That's part of the issue, because it certainly didn't happen within there's no way to prove that it happened within. It could have happened over 7 days. It could have happened over 15 days to get to a half inch. So I think that's a struggle. You are supposed to, if you have, I believe my thought process is, if it's forecasted where you have to do a during storm inspection and you end up with over a half inch of water in that rain gauge, you're doing a post storm during that window.
Okay.
I'd love to talk to you more about that, Robin, and debate it if you'd like. And John, what's your opinion?
Oh, I don't know on that one. I think basically, if it's forecasted, since everything is based on the forecast, if the pre-storm in my mind sets everything off.
Yes.
So if a pre-storm doesn't happen, then that event's not qualifying. Therefore, a post should not be required.
Right. That was
I'd love to ask the water board that question, but I tend to think that they would agree with that response.
Yeah. That was better articulated, John, than I was trying to do. So I appreciate that. Good job.
Let's see. There was a question here. It's kind of follow up on the QSP delegate training. Now, you talked about foundational, but site specific. Did you address that, the on-site training? And in particular, is that another bid item, or should that be another bid item? Because that involves, they require a site visit for that.
Right. So, I mean, I'm all for more bid items rather than less. And so that then when industry presented a list of bid items to assess CISWIS, It included more items, and it included not as many lumped together. Let me jump down to that slide again, my favorite slide in here, obviously. It included maybe not lumping all of these together, potentially having more, like, because you could argue that an NAL exceedance inspection by a QSP is more detailed probably than a monthly, but I don't know, you could argue either way, or a COI NOT, right? So I tried to make it simpler and have less items, but because I understand the difficulty of getting new bid items. So their question was again about the training. Yeah, I mean, site-specific training is a requirement. So the the new specification that comes out in October now states that you basically on Caltrans projects to be a delegate, to be a person who's working under the water pollution control manager, the assistant water pollution control manager, the person that can do inspections that are not required by our QSD or P. For weeklies, daily during storms, after storm event, those kind of things. They need to be an assistant water pollution control manager. And that also says you have to be both. You have to be an assistant water pollution control manager, which essentially is taking the 8-hour class. And you also have to meet the QSP delegate requirements, which is twofold to be a QSP delegate. You have to have foundational training and you have to have site-specific training. So again, I'm for more rather than less.
Right.
As far as bid items go, but people could say, well, that's only a one-time thing, so you ought to be able to include that. That's one of those. I see the argument both ways. That's a one-time training that ought to be able to be. That could be something that could be concluded in a lump sum item without, causing.
That's required to be 2.5 hours, by the way.
Yeah.
Was it Amy that's talking?
Yeah, so Bob, I dropped this in the chat too, but was there any discussion? Because again, most of these bid items are talking about the administrative or the QSP, QSD paperwork side of this, which in my experience, in the scheme of like a large transportation project, the difference between a QSP and a QSD is going to be somewhat minimal compared to the cost of the crew time to prepare for that event, right? So maybe you're looking at, 150 versus 300 for your inspection, but you're looking at, half a day or a day of a labor crew with potentially a little bit of equipment and materials. And I think that's kind of, to Amy Comte's point of why sometimes we're not getting a quality product is we're paying for that inspection, but we don't really have a mechanism to capture that labor, equipment, materials component, which is also an unknown at bid time because you don't know how many labor days you're going to lose or half days or whatever it's going to take to prepare for a storm event. Has that come into your conversation at all on these bid items?
So you're talking about adding a separate bid item for the actual crew time or the work to prepare for a storm.
Yeah, or potentially even it could be, Caltrans generally writes a suite of CCOs at the beginning of the project, and potentially, you can minimize risk by making this a force count change order, which is stormwater prep. So you're not asking the contractor to take on that liability of what it's going to take to prepare for this unknown number of storms, but you do have a mechanism to, pay them for that. And some of that, I agree, could be in the BMP line item, but not all of it, because there are specific tasks that you have to undertake before a rain event that you don't necessarily have to undertake at other times. And I think those costs are actually a larger cost and problem for contractors than the different inspections.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the issue with that is that you have, there is some things that end up being a force account. There's like temporary drainage now that there's a potential for force account work. There is some of the argument I would think in response to that, Amy. I don't want to speak for Caltrans, but what I've heard previously is that there's that there are other bid items. There's items there are other bid items there that's potentially that would be lumped in with, and so then you have to start really defining it. You're to really go down a rabbit hole in some ways when you're talking about that, because you do have temporary BMP items. You have other pieces to that puzzle that are what's the stormwater management item that includes, right. And so there's some items, some maintenance that's included in the line item for some of the temporary BMPs. So it all can get mixed in there, and it becomes a harder hill to climb when it comes to it. it's not about, it's not about a QSP inspection that happens 12 times a year to be, well, more often than that, but just in my example here, the QSP inspection that could happen 12 times a year being a make or break. But some Caltrans projects are awarded for $10 difference or $1,000 difference. So it's really about making sure to try and be fair about it and understand that. And I don't disagree with you when it comes to the fact that, yes, a crew of 5 people working half day should be is more expensive than the QSP showing up to the job site. I don't disagree with that, but kind of something for us to bring up at the CESWIS.
All right. Well, we're at 4 o'clock. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But hey, this has been a great dialogue. We are going to have a recording of this available online. I'm going to take the chat and also include that. And Bob, if you would send me a PDF of your notes, we'll include that. So thank you, everyone. And we have lots more workshops next 2 days. Hope to see you at some of them.
Great. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Allison.